Will, talk to me.
ABC Tuesday.
They took his daughter. She's coming home alive.
Will Trent, the series critics are calling powerful must-see TV, continues to thrill.
Shouldn't we strategize before we go in there?
If we screw up this case, a cop killer walks free.
With the riveting conclusion to a 2-part season premiere.
GBI!
Help me!
Get down!
Will Trent, all new Tuesday on ABC and stream on Hulu.
Lowe's knows how to help make your Super Bowl 59 party a touchdown. Let us help you prep your home to host with top brands like Charbroil, Blackstone, and LG, so you can be the MVP of game day. Plus, use the Lowe's app to find what you need for a seamless shopping run. Or huddle up with our Lowe's Red Vest associates to help make all your game time hosting decisions.
Some crimes are so heartbreaking or shocking that they change laws, change society, or even earn the label crime of the century. But the stories that made headlines in decades past aren't necessarily remembered today. I'm Amber Hunt, a journalist and author, and in each episode of this show, I'll examine a case that's maybe lesser known today, but was huge when it happened. This is Crimes of the Centuries. In the criminal world, art theft skates a fine line between, oh my God, and get a grip, no one died. Some people find the theft of it an abomination, and others figure that's a rich person's problem. It's either a cultural disaster or something easily fixable by inserting another picture in its place in the museum. I fall on the side of disaster. I mean, yes, no one died, but art can tell us so much about our history and our society. It's a window into civilization. It matters when it disappears. Law enforcement generally falls on the other side of the spectrum. 9 out of every 10 paintings that are stolen never see the light of day again. They just disappear into someone's home or their attic or the ether, apparently, to delight a very small audience of maybe one. Or maybe they're traded endlessly by drug cartels as collateral. Hard to say, but the statistic holds. That's the FBI statistic, ferreted out by their art crime team, which does, in fact, have an index of reported stolen art cross-referenced with art recovered and returned. The same 10% rule holds for the world's largest database that is run by the Art Loss Registry in Manhattan, something created by an international consortium of art researchers in the 1970s. Now, the statistic is misleading because so much art theft is not reported or not even noticed. We should all have that problem. And deeply overburdened law enforcement usually only gets involved in such messes when the art stolen is worth more than $50,000, or if it looks like it involves organized crime or is attached to some other crime. Yet there is a caveat to the 10% rule. The better the painter, the more likely the art is to be found. That's because there's so much heat on the thieves, so few places to even try to sell it, and so many people watching. It makes sense. Most stolen art is not recovered because local cops don't have a lot of experience with art theft. They're not required to contact the FBI or Scotland Yard or Interpol. When it's a big enough art loss to get their attention, they try their best. But art being stolen from people who can afford it is not much of a priority for, say, the New York Police Department that has quote-unquote real crime to deal with. That means that while people report that kind of theft to police, it's not until they contact a private art crime investigator to track it down do they have a prayer of getting it back. Dutch art crime investigator Arthur Brand explained to the Observer newspaper in 2008 that he's usually contacted by victims anywhere between 2 and 40 years after the theft has occurred. By then, the trail is mighty chilly. Then there are masterpieces that are taken from museum walls, sometimes in broad daylight, And everyone is immediately looking for them, with more than a few tips coming in, seeking the rewards usually offered for information and recovery in those cases. Those pieces, when and if recovered, get enormous press and a whole journalistic helping of why art matters pieces and what defines a masterpiece stories. In 1994, there was an art theft which did just that. But almost no one then, or now, has to be schooled in its meaning or its popular allure. Almost every sentient adult would have recognized it. It was the cover of Time magazine in 1961. Headline, Guilt and Anxiety. It is literally everywhere. T-shirts, posters, coffee mugs, keychains, and on every other piece of ticky-tacky stuff we cherish, if only because it comforts us during rough times. It speaks to all of us. James Payne of Great Art explained.
Under a blood-red sky, a terrifying figure with a skull-like face is staring out at us, and it appears to be screaming in anguish. Edvard Munch's The Scream, one of the most famous images in the history of art, has become for us a universal symbol of angst and anxiety.
On the same February day that the Norwegian Olympic Committee was opening the Lillehammer Winter Games, 2 men broke a window in the National Art Museum of Norway and, within 1 minute, exited the way they came in with only one painting, Edvard Munch's The Scream. Crimes of the Centuries is sponsored by Acorns. Hi, partner Scott. This sponsor is perfectly timed because we were just talking about how I already use Acorns to squirrel away extra money here and there.
I remember you saying that, but I don't remember how it worked exactly. So could you provide some exposition for me?
I sure can. Acorns is an investing app that makes it easy for everyone to start saving and investing. Even if you don't have much money to earmark for savings, Acorns lets you set up your checking account so that every time you spend money, the app rounds up your purchase so you can save your spare change.
This sounds so simple.
It really is. Acorns makes it easy to start automatically saving and investing so your money has a chance to grow for you, your kids, and your retirement. You don't need to be an expert. Acorns will recommend a diversified portfolio that fits you and your money goals. And you don't need to be rich either. Acorns lets you invest with the spare money you've got right now. You can start with $5, even just your spare change.
This sounds like it was made for me. I'm definitely not an expert, and you know I'm a journalist, so nowhere near rich. So I head to acorns.com/COTC.
That's right, acorns.com/COTC, or download the Acorns app to start saving and investing for your future today. A client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 1 compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/COTC. At the time it disappeared, Edvard Munch's masterpiece had recently been moved to a lower floor in the museum so that Norway could welcome all those international visitors as they flocked to see the country's most famous artist's most famous work of art. They had, without really thinking, placed it next to a window. It took the 2 men exactly 50 seconds to grab it and put it in a car, later reported to be either an Audi or a Mazda, that was ready and running to whisk it away. All the activity outside the museum had been captured by a closed-circuit camera that fed grainy same-time video to the guard inside the facility. There was no camera in room 10 where it was housed. Thieves left behind a pool of broken window glass, wire cutters, the ladder, and a note that read, "Thanks for the poor security." This would not be one of those under-the-radar art thefts. Within hours, the 2,000 reporters already gathered nearby would tell the world that the universal symbol for angst and madness was on the loose. Some experts, art and otherwise, would consider Edvard Munch a madman. So did he. When the scream was first exhibited, it did not include the inscription that Munch would later add, barely visible in the masterpiece. It reads, "Could only have been painted by a madman." The image that he painted was of a distorted man on a bridge, facing the viewer, holding his ears while his mouth is wide open in abject terror as the sky behind him almost shimmers with ominous red streaks. So obsessed with it, he crafted 3 additional versions of the almost identical image. The original work is done with paint, the second with crayon, the third in pastels, and the last in tempera paint. They are all on cardboard. Later, he also crafted lithographs in the same likeness, a reminder that he was constantly tortured by the image of the bridge, the fjords, and the sky behind them. The Scream is actually part of a 22-painting series that he always wished to be shown together. It's entitled Frieze of Life, and Munch did not want them considered separately, but as a total work of art. The Scream was, for the most part, deeply despised when it was first shown. Munch was not terribly distraught by this, mimicking that adage about how you shouldn't care what people say as long as they spell your name right. The scandal, such as it was, only served to make him visible, a good thing in his line of work. Born poor, hence his use of cardboard instead of canvas, and into a deeply religious and conservative family, his father considered his profession to be unholy. Edvard's early life was marred by tragedy. His mother and his sister died of tuberculosis.
His father, a fundamental Christian, told his son that the death of his mother and sister was divine punishment for their sins.
He had another sister, Laura, whom he adored. She was diagnosed with schizophrenia when they were both young adults. It is believed that the Scream, or at least the image that inspired it, was a recounting of an experience he had while walking with friends after seeing his sister, who had just been institutionalized. It's believed that he was tortured by her screams as he left. The scene created by Munch is an actual location that corresponds in every way to the position of the bridge, the angle of visibility, and the fjords and skies above it. It's up a hill and a popular overlook to view Oslo in a neighborhood called Ekeberg. It's very near the asylum and, as disturbingly, a slaughterhouse. According to Munch scholar Sue Prideaux, the bridge was known to be a favorite spot to die by suicide. Munch was not the first to paint that view, but he may be the only one who experienced it so viscerally. Munch wrote in his diary, translated from his native language, on January 22, 1892,
"I was walking down the road with 2 friends when the sun set. Suddenly, the sky turned as red as blood. My friends walked on. I stood there quaking with angst, and I felt as though a vast, endless scream passed through nature."
Tiny aside, the Scream was originally called the Scream of Nature. Makes you rethink the whole thing, doesn't it? Anyway, what's fascinating is that while the face he painted and the colors he used to express the surroundings may have been controversial, even scandalous, they were things Munch may have actually witnessed. In 1893, the year he wrote that journal entry, a volcano on an Indonesian island erupted repeatedly between May 20th and October 21st. One of the deadliest in history, it sent ash all over the world, as far as 300,000 miles away. The volcano also caused tsunamis and temperature drops worldwide, as well as darkness and excessive rain. But what's important here is that the dust was so heavy and moved so completely with the wind across the world that skies did almost biblically turn red, even in Norway. The menacing cloud formation in the painting, just FYI, is something known as nacreous clouds, something meteorologists say is common in winter in Norway. Don't ever say we don't teach you stuff here at Crimes of the Centuries. As to the face in the painting, there is much out there to read about where Munch got his inspiration for that expression. Some experts maintain that when Munch was studying in Paris in 1889, He and a friend who took him under his wing visited the Paris World's Fair. There, apparently on display, was a Peruvian mummy, a man who died with his mouth open and his hands covering where his ears would have been. It's posited that Munch and this friend visited the Peruvian exhibit and may have even talked at length about the visage. Munch's friend was Paul Gauguin. Again, let me remind you, this is all just conjecture, but it's worth knowing because maybe the fear you see in the Scream's face is something that humans have exhibited since we first knew what angst was. A separate interpretation of the figure is worth considering as well. Great Art explained again.
The figure is in fact not screaming at all. Rather, it is holding its hands over its ears to block out the scream.
One final note about the scream. Margaret Livingston, a Harvard professor and neurobiologist, demonstrated that exaggerated faces, like the one in the scream, are more likely to elicit strong responses than those with true-to-life expressions. She told the Wall Street Journal, quote, "That's why I think a caricature of an emotion works so well. It's what our nerve cells are tuned to," end quote. So, yeah, a lot of people have a lot to say about this work of art. At the time it was stolen, it was assessed at between $50 and $75 million. Not that it mattered. It was unsellable. Crimes of the Centuries is sponsored by Apostrophe. Guess what, Scott?
What?
Apostrophe is back. Apostrophe is a skincare company that was a sponsor a couple of years ago, and I love them so much that I kept using them, and now they've come back to sponsor the show again, and I'm thrilled.
I've been meaning to figure out what kind of skincare regimen I should use. You know me, I go to skin cancer screenings, but I've never used anything but sunscreen when I'm spending a day outside.
Apostrophe is an online platform that connects you with an expert dermatology team to get customized acne and dermatology treatment for your unique skin. Through Apostrophe, you can get access to oral and topical medications that use clinically proven ingredients to help clear acne.
So I'd fill out an online consultation about my skin goals and medical history? I suppose I'd snap a few selfies and send those too?
How did you know? Now I use an amazing anti-aging and hyperpigmentation treatment, but for people with acne, this is your place to access prescription treatments for all types of breakouts head to toe. Now we have a special deal for the audience. Get your first visit for only $5 at apostrophe.com/COTC when you use our code COTC.
Holy moly.
That's a savings of $15. This code is only available to our listeners. To get started, just go to apostrophe.com/COTC and click Get Started. Then use our code COTC at sign up and you'll get your first visit for only $5. Thank you, Apostrophe, for sponsoring this episode.
Will, talk to me.
ABC Tuesday.
They took his daughter. She's coming home alive.
Will Trent, the series critics are calling powerful must-see TV, continues to thrill.
Shouldn't we strategize before we go in there?
If we screw up this case, a cop killer walks free.
With the riveting conclusion to a 2-part season premiere.
Help me!
Get down!
Will Trent, all new Tuesday on ABC and stream on Hulu.
The 24-year-old night guard at the National Museum in Oslo had less than 2 months of experience watching his nation's greatest art treasures. But it'd been a busy time at the museum, what with all the amping up for the Olympic visitors who would pay to view all that Munch. 56 of his works had been selected, and originally they'd been spread throughout the museum's several stories. Now, though, they were moved to the second floor to ease the ability to get to them and to group them together in all their glory. They would be housed for maximum viewing in rooms 9, 10, and 12. The money painting, the one the visitors were no doubt there to see, was in room 10. For 5 straight days, CCTV footage would later show, one man went through the museum, lingering in room 10, ostensibly admiring the Munch collection. If anybody had paid attention, they would have recognized him. On February 12, 1994, 1/3 of those employed as Norwegian police were in Lillehammer, keeping watch over the world's finest winter athletes. At 6:29 a.m., when it was barely 15 degrees outside, the new guard sat in front of a bank of 18 cameras that he was not paying much attention to. He had already completed his indoor and outdoor rounds. As he dithered, 2 men outside propped a metal ladder against the second-floor windowsill and climbed up. One fell and went up again, knocked out a window, and climbed inside. An alarm rang at the guard station, yet the guard still didn't notice the view from the outside where a ladder was clearly visible. 50 seconds later, one of the thieves went down the ladder and waited while the second thief slid the 3-foot by 2-foot painting, complete with frame, down the rails of the ladder, quote, like a parent sending a toddler down the hill in a sled, end quote. That was a phrase from Edvard, the rescue artist. The man on the ground caught the painting, and the other man came after. A reporter for the ITN News Network reported that day,
"The whole thing took no longer than 60 seconds from start to finish. The burglars were well prepared. Captured here on a security camera, they're seen climbing a ladder and breaking in. It coincided with the moment the museum's alarm system was switched off for the arrival of cleaning staff."
The thieves then put this one painting in the back seat of the car like it was poster board for a 6th grade science project, and they were gone. A second alarm rang at 6:37. Something Dolnick explains was wind rushing through the broken window, ruffling the curtains, which indicated some kind of movement in the museum. Now concerned he had missed something, the guard called his supervisor, who told him to call the police. A third alarm suggested haste was in order. The police arrived. By now, the thieves had changed cars a few blocks away. Both had been stolen during the night, so there was little fear of them found to be missing yet. Easy peasy. The ladder had been left, as they knew it would because they'd cased that place too, at a nearby building site earlier and stashed nearby. The window they broke was of ordinary glass. The painting had hung by the window on a wire, which was easily cut. There was no sensor attached to the painting. 40 minutes later, it was obvious that what could not have happened has happened. Norway was embarrassed on the world stage. Sports reporters, many maybe waiting for a particular sport to show up on the Olympic schedule, were dispatched by their editors to the museum for the big story that had the potential of eclipsing the game's appearance of both American ice skaters, Nancy Kerrigan and Tanya Harding. This was the year that Nancy got her knee bashed in Detroit at the U.S. Figure Skating Championships. Almost immediately, art experts fretted terribly as they knew, while the vast majority of the public did not, that the piece that had just been taken was painted on cardboard and could be, if removed from its frame, just something else fit for the recycling bin. Quickly, a $25,000 reward was offered for any help in finding the culprits. The museum waited for a ransom demand. 5 days later, some anti-abortion activists, 2 were also former priests, said they knew where to find the painting. In fact, they strongly hinted that the piece would be returned if the anti-abortion film The Silent Scream was shown on nationwide television. Bo Knudsen, spokesman for the group, got a little cagey when asked if he knew who was responsible for the theft. He told Reuters that, quote, "We cannot be too open about this. We have sent a signal and we want this signal to be understood, but we have to be a bit cryptic," end quote. He was then asked if the group would have been willing to steal it to get their demands met, to which Knudsen said, "Yes, absolutely." The police then no-commented the news agency, CNN, the BBC, ITN, and every other organization that tried to follow up. Seems they were not buying what those guys were selling. This wasn't a ransom demand. It was political blackmail in a country that had some of the world's most forgiving abortion laws, largely backed by its populace. The police had more serious concerns. Meanwhile, Scotland Yard had a bona fide art squad that didn't believe that a crime in Norway was outside their boundaries. The world's greatest masterpieces were the world's to defend. They informed the Norwegian police that they were going to take a look. Enter Charlie Hill, arguably the world's most famous police detective dedicated to finding stolen art. He had proved repeatedly that he had contacts with the necessary people inside the darkest regions of the art world, having famously returned a Vermeer, a Goya, and a Titian, among other pieces that had gone missing. He started working out a plan for retrieving the masterpiece. But hold that thought. First, we have to talk about the thief. 2 months after the heist, a relatively famous former Norwegian football player named Paul Enger placed a birth announcement in one of Norway's largest newspapers, announcing the birth of his son. The child had arrived, the citation read, with a scream. Now this was interesting, because while Enger had been quite a sensation on the Norwegian team that had won several titles, it was no secret that he had an interesting side gig as a thief. Even the men on his team, some who had police backgrounds, knew that Enger had not gotten rich off of playing football. He would regularly show up with a different fancy car and plenty of cash on hand, and no one asked questions. The first time he was caught, he was only 19. This was followed by a successful run of art and jewelry thefts that were not small nor uncomplicated. He genuinely loved the game of beating law enforcement at every turn. Cars were a particular passion. At one point in time, he was the only man in Oslo who drove a Porsche. But he also loved art and bling. He once broke into a jewelry store and nabbed goods valued at something like $5 million. Soon enough, the side gig took over his job on the soccer pitch, and, while very accomplished at that, the thieving was so much more fun. He told documentary makers Nigel Levy and Sunshine Jackson that the rewards were bigger, and so was the attention. He had, almost all his life, idolized the Corleones. You know, the family in The Godfather. He would later say that he had become obsessed with the Scream as a child when his teacher took his classroom to visit the museum. As quoted later, he would tell documentarians that, quote, "As soon as I got close to the picture, I got an extraordinary feeling of anxiety, strange things in my head. I had such an intense connection with the Scream right away, and it's never left me," end quote. For a boy who lived in poverty and was regularly beaten savagely by his father, the Scream answered or comforted a need. This is Enger speaking.
I was the best criminal in Norway. I think it was myself I see in the painting.
Taking it would be almost therapeutic. The attention he would receive for being good at soccer or robbery had the power to quiet his anger. The theft of the Munch masterpiece and the keeping of it would maybe quiet it for good. His first try for it came in 1988, 6 years before the Olympic time try, when he and an accomplice climbed, stop me if this sounds familiar, into a window at the Munch Museum in Oslo and, through a random series of errors that included breaking the wrong window, got away with Munch's second most valuable piece, Love and Pain. From a YouTuber called C. Duffy.
When police raided his home, they were searching for evidence that could tie him to a jewellery heist in Oslo. But beyond all of the jewels and diamonds was Edvard Munch's 1893 masterpiece, Love and Pain, and now hung, pride of place, on Enger's wall.
His little misadventure ensured he was sent to prison, where he would later say he came up with a better plan for stealing what he most desired. That better plan, he would later sardonically joke, was to break the right window. So, after making a few visits to case the joint, that's exactly what he did, as Norway was about to have a spotlight aimed its way. A ransom was never part of the plan. Now, while Anger's past wasn't hidden, he was not the only possible suspect. Norwegian police continued to work separately on the case even as Charlie Hill launched into a ruse that would play into most thieves' desire to have a little spending money. It was a relatively simple plan that required a heap of cooperation from quite a few quarters. It was doable, given the stakes, but it had to involve enough money to make the whole thing sing. As Dolnick noted, Getty was a name that was synonymous with cash, and gobs of it. He wrote, quote, "Even crooks knew the Getty Museum, the sprawling Southern California museum named for its founder, J. Paul Getty, the oil billionaire who was at one time the richest man in the world, had endowed the richest museum in the world," end quote. As Hill told BBC News,
"We came up with a plan, just pose as the representatives of the J. Paul Getty Museum in California and tell these guys there's money to be had if they'll give us the picture back." The character I came up with, Chris Roberts, was a slightly dodgy, mid-Atlantic accented art dealer who was doing some buying for the Getty Museum in Europe. So I had a minder who we portrayed as an English gangster living in Amsterdam.
Hill reached out to Getty, whose help he would need to pull off the scheme. Getty had been reluctant at first, but came on board pretty fast. He agreed to create extensive online records of Chris Roberts' employment there, as well as personnel records and human resources that included annual reviews and payroll receipts, just in case anyone hacked into their database. They gave Hill business cards and the backstory that he was a roving scout for the museum based in Europe and a special assistant to the director. That was in case the thieves knew someone at the Getty who had never heard of this guy. Hill, as Roberts, relayed that he'd been authorized to spend a lot of money, hundreds of thousands if necessary, for the Scream. This would be a win-win for everyone, he said. It wasn't a ransom paid by the government of Norway. That would only encourage more theft. Rather, this was a goodwill gesture that Getty was ready to extend to the thieves. "We'll buy it from you, no questions asked. We will then, likely, return it to Norway. On occasion, thenceforth, they will loan it to us because we're the good guys who rescued it." Plus, U.S. law required that foundation spend 5% of their endowment each year, explained Dolnick. For Getty, that meant a mandatory $250 million per year. So really, it was a win-win-win all around. Now, undercover work is dicey in the best of circumstances, but the word about the man from the Getty and his quiet offer had to get out to organized crime, to drug cartels, to gallery owners who dabbled in the shady side, all while trying not to step on the toes of Norwegian law enforcement who didn't think Scotland Yard was necessary. Hill, a former U.S. Army paratrooper, was the son of an Oklahoma roughneck and a British dancer. He could easily manage the tricky cross-cultural problems that might arise, and because he did believe that great art was meant for all of us, he didn't particularly care if the thieves were caught, just that the painting was returned. Pretty quickly, the man from the Getty story got going, and it hit some pay dirt. Hill's connection to a rather dubious art dealer in London who knew who had taken the Scream yielded a goose chase of sorts until one of the thieves agreed to meet him and the art dealer in an Oslo hotel. Dodging Norwegian police, who seemed to be less undercover and more visible to the thieves, the going was not always easy. But the meet happened and, with a little skulking and whispering, thieves and Hill agreed upon the price of $530,000, or more than $1 million in today's money, for the Munch. They traveled together south to Askøystrand to a summer house where the painting was hidden in the basement. Here is Hill talking about that moment in a BBC documentary called The $1 Billion Art Hunt.
I stood it on its end and then took the sheet off. As I took the blue sheet off, to my amazement, there was the central figure of the Scream, but it was essentially an oil paint drawing of it. And I thought, what on earth is this? And then I suddenly realized, this is just the back of the painting. He actually must have felt this wasn't quite what he wanted to do and then flipped it over. And there was the painting. The minute you hold something like that in your hands, you know it's the real McCoy, because it just jumps out at you as a masterpiece.
Truth was, he did do some scrutinizing before he handed over the money. He told the BBC,
"This particular original version of the Scream was painted in 1893. The central figure, riven by angst, was thinking that this blood-red sky was coming through his brain. And Munch was mad enough to paint it. That particular version, the original version, he blew out a candle on it. I made a particular point of memorizing exactly how those candle wax drops looked.
The wax drops were there. It all unraveled from that point. Money was paid, the painting went home with Hill, and arrests ensued. The painting was returned to the National Museum on May 7th, 1994. Due to technical issues, most specifically because of the ruse and the use of false names, of the 4 men involved, only Paul Langer went to prison for the crime. The painting had been out of circulation for a scant 3 months. Some thought the aftermath would not have pleased the artist.
One of the ironies about the Scream is that when it was recovered after being stolen, it was quickly jumped upon by a small army of conservators. Munch, however, would have preferred they left it damaged as part of its ongoing life.
The art world preferred that all traces of the debacle be erased from history. That proved to be far easier said than done. Crimes of the Centuries is sponsored by Ollie. And we just got home from a winter vacation and Ollie was waiting for us on the front porch.
Your nephew?
No, Ollie's the name of our new dog food. I'm so excited. I have a meal of fresh turkey with blueberries thawing right now in the fridge to serve Ripley and Ellis in the morning.
I did see that. They're gonna love it. Now granted, they eat everything, including shoes and wrappers, but I read the ingredients and it looks like they're gonna be eating something super healthy.
Now here, read this.
Ollie's has absolutely no harmful fillers, no preservatives, and is made in U.S. kitchens with ingredients carefully sourced from trusted growers and producers around the world. Oh, look at the flavors. Fresh beef with sweet potatoes, fresh lamb with cranberries. Our dogs are going to eat better than we do.
And how it works is you fill out Ollie's 30-second quiz and they'll create a customized meal plan based on your pup's weight, activity level, and other health info. Give your pup a fresh start this new year by letting them taste test a personalized meal plan with Ollie.
Head to ollie.com/COTC, tell them about your dog, and use code COTC to get 60% off your first box of meals when you subscribe today. Plus, they offer a clean bowl guarantee on the first box, so if you're not completely satisfied, you'll get your money back.
That's OLLIE.com/COTC and enter code COTC to get 60% off your first box. Start your dog's new year off right with Ollie.
Will, talk to me.
ABC Tuesday.
They took his daughter. She's coming home alive.
Will Tratt, the series critics are calling powerful must-see TV, continues to thrill.
Shouldn't we strategize before we go in there?
If we screw up this case, a cop killer walks free.
With the riveting conclusion to a 2-part season premiere.
GBI!
Help me!
Get down!
Will Tratt, all new Tuesday on ABC and stream on Hulu.
One of the 4 versions of the Scream was stolen again in 2004, along with Munch's Madonna, from a newscast at the time.
Authorities say 2 or 3 armed, masked men burst into the Munch Museum in Oslo in broad daylight and took the paintings as visitors watched.
The daytime robbery was as brazen as it was stupid.
A photo taken by a witness outside the museum appears to show the robbers walking to a getaway car with the paintings in hand.
I don't even know if the thieves were trying to get away with it. 3 men were convicted of the crime even before the artwork was recovered. According to Mental Floss, the city offered more than $300,000 in reward for return of both of the works. Reporter Christy Puchko notes that it was all about branding. Because of the shock and horror of the thefts and the emotion evinced by the more popular painting, the Mars Company put out an ad in August 2006 which had the red M&Ms playing hopscotch inside the framed piece of art. It was simply an upper-crust-aimed effort to promote the introduction of dark chocolate M&Ms, presuming, I guess, that only the little people eat milk chocolate. Anyway, the company then offered to reward anyone who returned the paintings with 2 million dark chocolate M&Ms. That is 2.3 tons of them, for the record. Lo and freaking behold, a few days after the ad first ran, a convict tried to make a plea deal for their return, wanting only conjugal visits and the promised candy as recompense. Not long after, and it's unclear how this all came about, the slightly damaged paintings were found August 31st, 2006. When it all shook out, Mars gave the cash value of the prize, $26,000, to the Munch Museum. When the Scream that came up for auction in 2012 was in transit to New York, gamblers laid 20-to-1 odds that it would be snatched before it got there. I'm not sure if that means the painting is considered a joke, a commodity, or just too famous. Maybe its history makes it all three. Edvard Munch had a nervous breakdown in 1908, but recovered after seeking treatment and giving up alcohol for a time. He continued to paint as his reputation grew. He died in 1944. An obituary in the Daily Telegraph described him as, quote, an historic figure in modern art, end quote. Charlie Hill died in 2021 while on the hunt for the thieves who took the $500 million worth of art from Boston's Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, which we covered in an earlier episode. Hill was notably convinced that it was, at the time, all safely kept in a house in Dublin, and the crime had been the work of Whitey Bulger. That art has still not been recovered. Paul Enger died in July of 2024 at the age of 57. In 1999, he escaped from incarceration and showed up in a cafe where celebrities and paparazzi were sure to see him. His response was to mug for the camera, all the while knowing he was going to be recaptured at any moment. He knew it was a revolving door, as each sentence was never more than a few years, and he thought he had plenty of time. It's said that he kept a poster of the Scream in every prison cell he ever lived in. As predicted, the unrepentant criminal was convicted over and over again of thefts of all variety, taking the opportunity in 2007, while in prison, to learn to paint. Those who documented his life, according to the 2023 Guardian review of same, say that Enger was a man of many gifts, perfectionism and incredible work ethic among them, that were used in service of the wrong things because his anger and grief were too deep for him to see he could be successful any other way. Those law enforcement personnel who caught him thought he was just, quote, a hooligan and a thief, a self-serving son of a bitch, end quote. As for Munch, he is now considered a founder of Expressionism, works that express the inner life of us all, and his most famous work is considered an icon of modern art. Of the 4 versions of the Scream, the original and 2 other versions are safely guarded now in Norwegian museums. The 4th was sold at Sotheby's in May 2012 for $120 million, setting a new record at the time as the most expensive piece of art sold at an auction. The record is now held by Leonardo da Vinci's Salvator Mundi. It's valued at $450 million. There are those in the art world who believe that, should the original Scream be put out for sale tomorrow, the winning price would be in excess of that, because it's just so famous. The face on the Scream was, as Wikipedia notes, quote, imitated, parodied, and, following the expiration of its copyright, outright copied, which led to it acquiring an iconic status in popular culture, end quote. Even I have an homage to the Scream hanging on my own wall. It's an amazing replica painted by my ex-husband Elijah, with one important change. In his version, the tormented figure is holding up an iPhone on a selfie stick. Wes Craven's Scream movie franchise, launched 2 years after the '94 heist, makes great use of a familiar black and white Ghostface mask. Depending on who you ask, the mask owes its origins to Munch or to a 1930s comic, though Craven told the Wall Street Journal in 2012 that, quote, it's a classic reference to just the pure horror of parts of the 20th century, or perhaps just human existence, end quote. It is undoubtedly a face that calls to us, that we know, that we feel, that might explain why anger had to have it, and Charlie Hill had to find it to give it back to the rest of us, so we can relate to the madness. Journalist Amy Wilson read The Rescue Artist by Edward Dolnick. It's a fascinating read on the career of Charlie Hill. She also watched Inside the Tortured Mind of the artist who painted the Scream, the incredible history of Edvard Munch's Scream, and the story of the Scream. She also screened excerpts of The Man Who Stole the Scream, a British documentary not available to American audiences. Pieces in the New York Times, The Economist, and Vanity Fair were also helpful. Amber got pronunciation help from her artist and art historian ex-husband. Crimes of the Centuries is available early and ad-free through Grab Bag Collab. Join us at patreon.com/GrabBagCollab to hear not just exclusive content related to this show, but to also get access to several other shows on our profit-sharing network. Unless noted in the citations, this case was researched and written by me, Amber Hunt, and produced by Amanda Rossman and Henry Lavoie. Original music is by Bruce Hunt, Andrew Higley, and occasionally by my son, Hunt Van Benscoten. Other music comes from Soundstripe and Epidemic Sound. If you like the show, help us out by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. For more information or to recommend a case, go to centuriespod.com. On Instagram, we're at centuriespod, and check out our Crimes of the Centuries podcast Facebook page.